Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 67 of Speaking from the Heart. Today, we're going to challenge the stories that we have in order to have a change of heart, or maybe even having just a chance to change. And I think that as we even talk about this topic as we approach the new year, I think it's really important to keep in mind that change is always inevitable. Change is something that is always constantly happening in our lives, whether they are personal, professional, or even organizational for that matter. And especially as we get closer to the end of the year, we might be evaluating some of the things that have been successful and maybe some of the things that haven't been successful as well. Having people to talk to, having places to go, and having things to do oftentimes creates those opportunities in our lives to keep moving forward, to keep testing the ways in which we can feel empowered to write that new narrative in our lives. And I think that one of the things that we can absolutely do right away in order to create that systemic change is to listen to episode number 65 of my podcast, in which I talk about this type of subject of challenging our mindsets, to really put on the line everything that we've been able to think about in order to help ourselves move forward. Today, I want to talk a little bit about maybe some strategies that you can use to help you get started on that path. One of the first things that you could absolutely do that I have been finding to be very influential is to have a vision board. Now, if you've ever heard of the concept of the vision board, it might be going all the way back to your grade school years. You might have cut out some magazine pictures, some notable quotes, maybe even some influential situations or events that were happening, but they were all defining ways in which that were creating some of the things that were happening in your young years. And I think that's essentially what we're trying to say here. In your adult life, what are some of the people, places, and things that are happening that might make up who you are and what you want to be? To have a vision board, though, is to actually create not only those things in which we want to have, but to also have the opportunities to be able to explore in the new year what we can do and what we can become as part of a picture narrative. So grab those magazines, grab those individuals, grab those opportunities that you might have all around you, because we can start to change that story, that narrative that we have in our lives by just putting it down where we're at now and what we want to look like in the future. Even though we're talking about a vision board, which might be more personal in nature, what do you do when you're looking at a professional realm, or even looking at an organization for that matter? Well, it might be a little bit easier for you to do this type of exercise even if you are an individual, which is essentially writing down what are the things that you were able to be successful for in one column, and writing down things that you weren't so successful in the second column. So if you haven't grabbed that sheet of paper yet, I'd encourage you to do so. Have that sheet of paper along with a pen to be able to start writing down some of those things that you've done, or even just bring up a Word document and creating a simple table. It has potential to really show you what you've been able to truly achieve this year, along with so many other things. If you're a person that likes to really write about everything that you do, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on a blog post, maybe even on an old-fashioned journal for that matter, it might be time to start paging back through some of those entries that you've done in order to create those opportunities that you might have for the future. Now, it's all simple and maybe easy to do, to cut out pictures and quotes, maybe to write down certain things, but from an organizational aspect, where do you even begin? I always think about, even as I have reached towards the end of my first year being open with Your Speaking Voice LLC, about all the things that I did very well, but also all the things that I didn't do so well in, that aligned with not only the mission of my business, but also the values that align with it as well. Now, in the early episodes, starting from episode 3, I talk a lot about what the mission of my business is and the values: confidence, determination, relationships, not particularly in that order, in this podcast. So if you're interested in checking out what I talked about in those, you can certainly review those episodes. But I even look at my values and think about what are the things that I've done to continuously achieve the organizational success that I want to see not only in my business, but also myself being a sole member LLC. I have to keep remembering, though, that even though I'm doing things that are helping the business, what are the things that I'm doing to help myself and my clients and my future clients, for that matter, to keep continuing to write that new narrative? In other words, what are some of the offerings or some of the things that I could do to change it up for the new year? Not to just change everything about what I've been doing, because some things might have been very good in which I was doing, but keeping in mind what are some of the things that I might be able to change that might make it better. And I think we have to think about the fact that with all these things happening in our lives, whether it's personal, professional, or even organizational for that matter, it's about the concept of time that we have to enhance, that we have to embrace in order to create those reasons for that change. This is the time of year to do it, especially as we get closer to the end, which for many of us, I know this will be crunch time, especially as we get towards this end of year, to make sure that we have all the presents wrapped, to make sure that we have money in the bank account in order to come up with unanticipated expenses, maybe those year-end expenses that we need to shove in before we go and report our taxes to the dreaded IRS, the Internal Revenue Service here in the United States, but even abroad for that matter. What are some of the things that you're doing right now that not only create the best version of who you are, but maybe some of the things that you want to create as the stepping stones or the building blocks for the new year? I know for me personally, as I start to reflect on what those things are for the end of the year, I think of numerous things that I can do, and I've already shared about how I've been breaking this old Josh version of myself into something that is brand new, something that's radical in nature, that I know that I'm really excited to be sharing some of the new enhancements that we'll be doing here at my business, and even through this podcast for that matter, in the new year. But it's so much more than just getting ready and anticipating for the new year, more than it is to create small little steps that help to transform us and help to push us into that right direction. And this is where many people fall into the trap of just writing big, hairy, audacious goals, but they never put a plan behind them. Now, for me personally, I know that we can talk on, and we're going to have some guests here in the near future that are talking about even some of the things that we are setting as goals for the new year in the fitness realm, amongst other areas. But I will say that even with all those things that we do, one of the consistent themes that I continuously have in my own life that I'm trying to do better with is to break it down into small, actionable items. And that's even what I do for my business. When I work with clients, I don't want this to be an overwhelming BHAG or big, hairy, audacious goal process. I want this to be something that allows them to take actionable steps today. I don't want them to feel like they are moving back and forth trying to determine what is really the best course of action in order for them to write that new change in their lives. But the truth of the matter is, some people don't even know where those steps are. So I'm telling you right now, if you haven't started thinking about it now, if you have never worked with a coach before, this is the time to go and reach out to one. It doesn't have to be me. It could be anybody that you know personally or you look up online that you feel attracted to that will align with the values that you're trying to achieve, even for the new year. Now is the time to start today. Even though some people might have their calendars booked all the way through the end of this year, it doesn't mean that you have to put it off either. Having a plan in place in which you're starting to think about what some of those things are that you wish to work on in the new year, whether that's in public speaking, whether that's in your interview preparation, whether that's even having life coaching done to help you go through a traumatic situation and you need that extra level of support that's beyond a therapist. Having some of those steps now can help to change the story that you have in order to create that best version of yourself. Let me say that again. Starting that change now can create the story that you wish to have in the future. Now, it's really important to think about this. Not only are you entitled to that new story that you wish to have, you are willing to create some of that effort that goes behind it by starting to pre-plan what you want to talk about with that coach, who you want to work with as that accountability partner, even if it isn't a coach for that matter. Because even if it's a personal, professional, or organizational goal in which you want to achieve, one of the biggest things that you can do to keep moving forward, to keep testing the ways in which you can feel empowered to write those new narratives in the new year, means actually doing some of the things that I just mentioned earlier in this episode. Doing that vision board. Writing down what you've done well and what you haven't done well. Those are some ways in which you can start. But the real test, in which if you really want to challenge yourself to create that best version of who you are in the new year, to radically go in a completely different direction than maybe you have been before, is to really sit down and contemplate what your relationship is, not just with others, but with yourself. Here we go again. We're going to talk about how we might be our own worst enemy, which we've talked about in other episodes. But here's the key. If you are able to surround yourself with opportunities, if you are able to create those best versions of yourself, you have to create the right mindset. But even with the right mindset, you could still fall into the wrong trap. You could be leading down a path where you might not be able to come back from. What do I mean by that? I think that for many of us, we often get afraid of what that change looks like in our lives because we have to work on not just the very essence of the things that we need to do on a daily basis to create that change, but we also have to work on ourselves because working on ourselves might be some of the barriers that stand in our own way. No matter if you're an organization, whether you are a working professional, or you're just working through some personal stuff that might be affecting you and how you can ultimately change. It's really important to think about, it's not only about the concept of holding on to maybe what you've been through, but it means letting go of some of those things that aren't helping you at all. Maybe it's going to that fast food restaurant. Maybe it's going to have that dry cleaning done. Maybe you can put that off for another week. Maybe it's about holding off on that luxury car that you always wanted to buy. Regardless of the pipe dream that you might have, even if it is owning your own home for that matter, I think the biggest thing is that we are faced with challenges, and being prepared for the unknown might also mean having an understanding of how we can create those opportunities to keep moving forward, to keep understanding that sometimes the brightness that we have inside of our lives might be disturbed by some unknown challenges that come along the way. I think that part of writing our new story means understanding that there will be new roadblocks that come along the way. Sometimes those things in which we are not prepared to handle whatsoever, but yet here we are again, facing something similar to what we have been dealing with before. But I think that if we're ever going to shine brightly, we have to understand that there will be things in which we might be having to handle because they are going to come up. I think of it this way. We have the feelings or the emotional literacy in which we can address those things if we're just starting to work on what is truly important. But as part of this, we have to work on not only our thoughts, our abilities to use the words in which we have, but we also have to have captive distortion in which we create that opportunity to just throw off those negative thoughts into a different dimension. That sounds pretty meta, if you ask me. And I probably would agree with you that really, I don't think we're going to have that distortion field to be able to throw things into a different direction readily available. But it really builds upon this. If you really think that it's about just working on a set of goals, having a little bit of tasks that go alongside of it, and also understanding that maybe you can create those efforts in our lives in which we could just do a little bit of bursts in order to understand how we can be better in the future. I think you got it all wrong. This is a long, drawn-out process. And for some people, they like to rush it. And then when they rush it, they will get rushed results. They won't be as complete as they really should be. But the truth of the matter is, if you really want to have systemic change, you have to build the right habits. So start today. You still got time in this year, and you can still give yourself credit in that left side column in which you're saying you're successful. But the possibilities are endless when it comes to potential, and even if it seems a little bit disorganized for that matter, you know that you at least made your best effort. Starting out with that effort is what is key. Because the story that in which we're creating is going to be messy. They are going to have pitfalls, they're going to have loose transitions, they're even going to have mistakes, just as much as when I edit this episode every single time. But yet, as part of this whole editing process that we go through in our lives, we have to understand that picking up the pen is just only one step of that process. If we're ever going to have the chance to change our story, if we're ever going to have the chance to change what we have personally or professionally or even within our own organization, whether it's a for-profit, non-profit, or something in between, we have to understand one thing, that it starts with just us, and that even if we are able to create that us story, which will evolve into our story, I think that it will be worth it in the long run. There's always going to be people that will help you explore that realm of potential possibility. And whether you throw distortion raves or throw words into the air, thinking that you have this literacy of understanding what other feelings are being gone through to create that best version of who you are, know this, that it isn't as easy as you think. But as long as you're willing to put that effort and that commitment to something, that's what matters the most. You don't have to be perfect, because life would be pretty dull and boring without that opportunity to keep changing, to keep evolving, to keep moving forward. I think becoming who we really meant to be with the voice that we have means understanding that in this ever-changing world, things will not always go to plan. So here's my real question for you. Even with all the vision boards, all the successes and non-successes, even all the things in which you are working on in yourself, are you ready for change? Are you really ready for exploring what's inside your heart? Because let's face it, if we're ever going to have a chance to change, if we're ever going to rewrite the story that we've been writing for all our lives, even for this past year as we enter the new year, it might mean examining not just what's inside our hearts, but changing the words and changing the thoughts and changing the feelings of how we associate not just with ourselves, but with each other. Thanks for listening to episode number 67 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.